Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is the fucking craziest game I've ever played. We got 89 playable characters, over 100 stages, over 1,000 music tracks, and this Super Smash Bros. Game has officially reached parody levels of content again. We got Steve vs. Joker vs. Terry vs. Dragon Quest vs. Sephiroth vs. Banjo and Kazooie vs. another fucking Fire Emblem character vs. the big titty bimbos from the shitty Xenoblade game. Those bitches got in. They add in Kazuya from Tekken. Oh my god, apparently Sakurai walked 5 feet over to the cubicle right next to him and just asked for it. What a god. We got Sora from Kingdom Hearts, and luckily they didn't include all the stupid Disney shit and ruin the fucking game. They added in Min Min from one of the worst games Nintendo has ever made, but since it's a Nintendo game, they just gave it a pass and added it anyways because they didn't make anything else new. And now we finally got the greatest and most highly requested character of all time, Piranha Plant. Oh my god, it's fucking over. Sakurai and Bandai Namco have delivered on one of the most batshit crazy Super Smash Bros. Games of all time. But apparently, that's still not good enough. You see, once you get past all the excitement and joy that the Super Smash Bros. Ultimate DLC provides, there's this dirty underbelly of ungrateful motherfuckers who still can't play their favorite incredibly niche roster pick. It's like Sakurai finally got around to putting in Banjo-Kazooie and Sora and all the long time requested characters, but oh no, apparently the game sucks because Shadow the Hedgehog isn't in the game. Like, fuck off! Fuck you! Now, if this all sounds familiar, it's because I already made a video about this. I spent most of that video going over my own thoughts of the base game roster of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, went through my own personal methodology for picking and choosing the best possible characters for the series, and then talked about every single highly requested character I could find and gave my own thoughts on them. And while I initially thought it would be a very fun, lighthearted video concept, it ended up being very negative. You see, what I didn't anticipate when coming up with this video concept was that a lot of the most popular requested characters for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate were actually not very good. Naturally, with all the most important Nintendo characters and third-party characters already being in the game, the vast majority of the remaining characters requested by fans for the Pack 1 DLC were mostly D-tier trash losers who still weren't included into Smash because, you know, they fucking sucked. It also didn't help that a lot of Super Smash Bros. Fans were absurdly stupid when it came to their own personal expectations of what characters they thought were the best. I mean, it's one thing to be a huge fan of Super Mario RPG and want Geno included into Super Smash Bros. Because you think that'd be a cool idea, but then it's another thing to stupidly believe that Geno is the most iconic and important character in video game history and then constantly acting like an annoying asshole on the internet for like literal years of your life with the completely unrealistic expectation that a side character from a 25-year-old SNES game will absolutely be included in the next Super Smash Bros. Game and then inevitably losing your shit when it obviously doesn't end up happening. Because believe it or not, Geno isn't as recognizable and influential and as beloved as characters like Cloud or Mega Man or fucking Pac-Man or like literally anything else. Meanwhile, the base game of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate featured the largest character roster of any game ever made with an all-star cast of classic characters, which only amplified how stupid it was when people were being disappointed because their favorite obscure D-tier trash-ass character didn't make it in. So, to fully understand the situation during the time, you had this insane group of Smash fans who were ungrateful motherfuckers who didn't even understand how far Super Smash Bros. Has come, who were also incredibly ignorant and lacked even the most basic comprehension of video game culture, who didn't even understand why some characters were better than others because they don't play anything outside of baby games designed for toddlers, who would then also end up constantly whining and complaining on the internet after every single character announcement when things didn't go their way. And it's not even the fact that people want these characters in the game, but it's like the fucking gall to be surprised when it doesn't happen. So, as a certified expert in dickless nerd shit, I decided that enough was enough. I consolidated as many forum posts and character polls I could find, I took the most popular requested characters from the entire community, and then systematically talked about why each character would work and which ones were terrible, and put it into a single giant clusterfuck video. Because these Super Smash Bros. Fans were too fucking stupid to get it. They're too dumb. So now I have to go through all this stupid shit and thoroughly explain why these characters aren't as good as they think they are, because this is some dickless nerd shit and I don't have a dick. Alright? And as we all know, talking about the Smash roster is the most limp dick, pointless conversation you can participate in, and I was the only person who was qualified to make this video because everyone is an idiot except for me. So obviously everyone loved that video. It was one of the best videos ever made. All the smart people loved it. All the obnoxious Smash fans fucking hated it. It was simultaneously my most liked and disliked video of all time. And now that the game has finally reached the end of its life cycle, we're gonna do another one. So, to continue our conversation from last time, I think it's important to expand on my thought process on what makes a good character for Super Smash Bros. While also addressing some common criticism from the previous video. In my previous video, I spent a decent amount of time talking about the qualities of the base game roster of Ultimate and what made certain characters good or bad based off their strengths and weaknesses. To quickly summarize what I previously said, the best characters on the Smash roster have a rich history, originate from a long-running series of games, and have a moveset that perfectly incorporates their canon in-game abilities. These kinds of characters are the ideally perfect kinds of fighters that are immaculately designed, whereas every other kind of character on the roster are only slightly worse with varying degrees of quality. There's slightly worse characters who are very similar to the best characters regarding their legacy, but simply lack movesets which truly represent their in-game abilities. There's clone characters that have movesets based off previous characters on the roster, but were added to increase representation while minimizing development time. There's a big group of weirdos that have great movesets but aren't necessarily as influential as the main cast. There's your outsider third-party characters that have amazing legacies and a great moveset where their only flaw being that they aren't Nintendo characters. And then you have Dr. Mario and Dark Pit, who just fucking suck dick and shouldn't be in the game. Now, the reason I broke it down this way in my previous video was because I wanted to explain my own thought process for how I personally viewed the current roster before I started the discussion on all the new potential fighters for the Pack 1 DLC. Of course, obviously there isn't like an actual written set of rules for designing a Super Smash Bros. Fighter, and Sakurai could literally do whatever he wants, but if you think the team over at Bandai Namco weren't thinking about these kinds of things when they were picking out new characters for the DLC, then you're being fucking ridiculous. From a creative perspective, their goal is to make as many people as happy as possible while also making a successful product. And yeah, I guess Sakurai could literally just add in some random ass character and make some stupid shit up and put him on the roster, but why would they do that when there's so many opportunities to do something better? Of course, regardless of how well the game turns out, the annoying discourse that happens every single time a new Super Smash Bros. Comes around will always exist because the vast majority of players all want different things. For example, if you were someone who desperately wanted an ARMS character in the game, it was probably because you thought having more Nintendo characters with unique gameplay mechanics was more important than adding in a much more popular third-party character with a fucking sword and a down B counterattack. In contrast, if you wanted more high-quality third-party characters to increase the scope of the series, then you probably don't give a shit about all the D-tier trash-ass Nintendo characters that haven't made it in already because they're kind of boring and not all that exciting in the grand scheme of video games as a whole. Meanwhile, the most annoying group of people I've seen don't even think about any of this stuff and just want to see their favorite character in the game, and they don't even give a shit whether or not the character would be unique or if it'd be fun to play or even if the character is popular or well-known, because they just want their favorite character on the roster, and who cares if it sucks dick? So obviously, when everyone comes together to discuss this incredibly nuanced topic in the marketplace of ideas, it always features a giant clusterfuck of random ass characters all across the spectrum. Sometimes they're really good, and sometimes they're really bad, and sometimes it's like some guy you don't even know, and sometimes it's a super popular character that would suck ass, and sometimes it's a really cool character that'd be fun to play, but they'll probably never get into the game because no one gives a fuck. Or it's like some critically acclaimed character that would be awesome, but it's just past their time and their opportunity is just gone now, and this discussion just goes on and on and on for years and years and years for just about every single video game character ever made. So when it came to navigating this complete cesspool of garbage in my previous video, I took a pretty draconian approach. In fact, a lot of people thought I was so harsh that I was accused of being an elitist, gatekeeping asshole, which is just a spicy way of saying that I actually have standards. After all, the only reason anyone cares about the Super Smash Bros. Roster to begin with is because it's literally built off elitist exclusivity. Super Smash Bros. Started out as a massive Nintendo circle jerk, and when third-party characters were finally included into the game alongside the most iconic video game characters of all time, it came with itself a sort of prestigious honor that wouldn't exist if not for Sakurai already being a gatekeeper. If Super Smash Bros. Brawl came out with Solid Snake and Sonic, and it also immediately included Altair Hair and Nico Bellic and Glover, like no one would give a shit anymore because it wouldn't be special. Like, do you think it's a coincidence that only 5 out of the 89 characters on the Super Smash Bros. Ultimate roster were created by Western game studios? There's a fucking reason for that. Nintendo is a Japanese company. All the Japanese studios interact with each other and obviously take pride in being leaders in the video game industry and are naturally gatekeepers as a result. A lot of the best games that are exclusively made for each system have historically been made by Japanese developers. Diddy Kong, King K. Rool, Banjo and Kazooie, and Dark Samus were already considered to be Nintendo characters to begin with because they were made by second-party studios who were hired by Nintendo. And the biggest reason Steve was added into the game as a fighter was because Minecraft was literally the most successful game ever made in the history of forever on the fucking planet, and Sakurai could not ignore it. So guess what, dumbasses? Super Smash Bros. Is literally gatekeeping 101. If you thought I was being an elitist gatekeeping asshole in my previous video, then you were basically telling me I was doing a good job. In fact, when all these dumbass Smash fans were complaining about their favorite D-tier trash characters not being in the game, they're just doing the same shit that I'm doing, but the only difference is that I have better taste. You see, to the average uncultured Nintendo fan who only plays Nintendo games, boring-ass characters like Waluigi would probably seem like the best choice to add to the Smash roster because all they play is the basic bitch Nintendo shit and they don't know any better. Meanwhile, I play as many kinds of video games as I can. I play Nintendo games, I play the incredibly niche shit, I play the popular shit, I play PC games. I'm always trying to refine my palette and expand my knowledge on as many genres as I can. I'm always looking out for future indie games that look promising or looking out for that diamond in the rough. And even when I haven't played certain games, I can usually tell whether or not they're good based off my own personal experiences. Alright, when all these hardcore Nintendo fans were complaining about having no games on the Wii U, did any of these motherfuckers play the Wonderful 101? No! They fucking didn't, because they don't know shit. To put it simply, I play a lot of video games and I've developed really high standards as a result. In my mind, I personally think the best characters to include in Super Smash Bros. Are the most hypothetically perfect characters with no downsides whatsoever. And frankly, the vast majority of new potential DLC characters requested by the fans didn't match this criteria. Simon Belmont was probably the last classic third-party character that I felt was truly missing from the roster, whereas everything else included in the Pack 1 and Pack 2 DLC were almost like supplementary content that just improved the already perfect base game roster. In fact, out of all the highly requested characters discussed all across the internet, I feel like the Monster Hunter was the only character that I believed would have been an objectively fantastic choice. Considering the long-lasting series relationship with Nintendo over the years, and Monster Hunter Rise absolutely killing it on the Switch, and the already massive representation that Monster Hunter already has in the base game of Ultimate, I feel like the Monster Hunter would have fit in with the rest of the roster pretty well. And despite the Monster Hunter not being absolutely necessary, it was definitely my #1 pick. I also thought Banjo and Kazooie and Wonder Red were great choices as more niche Nintendo characters. Banjo and Kazooie were obviously an irrelevant bullshit mascot character from the 90s, but as a classic Nintendo character created by Rare on the Nintendo 64, I feel like it was one of the most highly requested characters that I thought made sense. Wonder Red was more of a biased personal choice that I thought would be really cool, but as I already mentioned, literally no one gives a shit about the Wonderful 101 because all the basic bitch Nintendo fans didn't play it because it didn't have Mario on it, so obviously Wonder Red will never be included. So even when it comes to characters that I enjoy and think are awesome, it's still really easy to pick apart their flaws and approach things from a more objective angle. Hence why I was so critical in the previous video. Now, another reason why my video came off as being super negative was simply because a single negative aspect of a potential new fighter will heavily outweigh all of their positives. I mean, when you're looking at hundreds upon hundreds of characters from all across the video game industry and figuring out which 5 would be the best possible choices, it's only natural that the barrier to entry will become extremely difficult and even the most competent of characters will start looking really bad. That's why it's almost a waste of time to spend 10 minutes for every single potential fighter and exhaustively going over every single possibility for their movesets and their relationship relationship with Nintendo and their historical significance as a video game character, because at the end of the day, any character worth adding to the roster is already competent enough to meet all this criteria. Of course, when your run-of-the-mill content creators put together their fun little video about the one character they want in Super Smash Bros., they usually mostly cover the positive aspects of the character by geeking out over every single potential little detail, right down to every single attack, their alternate costumes, their stage, the music tracks, and their taunts. And while it's fun to nerd out over the possibility of a character's inclusion in Smash, you also fall into the trap of not seeing the forest from the trees. So in many ways, my previous video was almost like an inverse to this approach. By solely focusing on only one or two negative aspects of a potential new fighter, I was able to get straight to the point, address the matter at hand in only a minute or so, and then swiftly move on to the next character without wasting too much time. It also doesn't help that anyone can make anything sound good, even if the character actually sucks. I mean, when all you're doing is jerking off to the possibility of your favorite video game character being on the roster and hyping up all the positive aspects of the character, then obviously you can make anything sound good with little to no effort. Now, if you don't believe me, let's do a fun little thought experiment. Right now, I'm going to pick out the absolute worst character I can think of for the Super Smash Bros. Roster and tell you why they're good by using the same kinds of talking points as all these other dumbasses. In fact, I'll just shit out a basic-ass Super Smash Bros. YouTube video right now and just prove how stupid this thought process is. Here we go. Yo guys, I'm a gamer, you're a gamer, we're the gamers. I've seen a lot of highly requested characters for Super Smash Bros. That are freaking epic, bro, and I'm here to talk about my #1 pick for Super Smash Bros. Of course, there's a lot of awesome characters that fans want in the game like Tails, Crystal, Crash Bandicoot, Knights, Ratchet & Clank, Spyro, Klonoa, Bubsy, Blinks, but you know what'd be better than all those awesome characters? Hear me out on this one. It's the Brickster from Lego Island. As we all know, Lego Island 1 and 2 are some of the greatest games ever made, and the Brickster is the most iconic LEGO character of all time. Not only has the Brickster appeared in multiple games across the LEGO franchise, but he's also made a brief cameo in Mario & Luigi's Superstar Saga. Of course, you could argue that Pepperoni, the dude with the food, would be a solid choice since he's the main protagonist in Lego Island 1 and 2, but the Brickster is simply a fan favorite and would have the best moveset. His neutral B attack could utilize his iconic spicy breath by eating Papa Briccolini's ultra hot and spicy pizzas that he famously uses to break out of jail. His up B could fly through the air by using the police helicopter. He could summon the Brickster bots for his side B from Lego Island 2, and believe it or not, he could also pick up a Lego brick, and wait till you hear this one, folks, he could pick up a Lego brick and throw it as a projectile. I mean, the possibilities are endless. Now, of course, I do recognize that a LEGO Star Wars character would clearly be the most popular choice to represent the LEGO franchise, but sadly, the inclusion of a LEGO Star Wars character would simply be too complicated. As we all know, LEGO owns the rights to the minifigures, Disney owns the copyright on the character designs on the heads and torsos, and frankly, it's such a legal nightmare that even LEGO employees don't want to deal with it. That's why the Brickster is clearly the best choice. Not only would his inclusion be much more possible without dealing with the massive copyright problems, but he also represents the classic era of LEGO games that all the fans know and love. Not only are Lego Island 1 and 2 a freaking classic, but who could forget about LEGO Racers, Rock Raiders, LEGO Loco? These are classic games that everyone has played. Now, the common complaint I hear about a LEGO inclusion in Super Smash Bros. Is that the LEGO company didn't originally make video games, but frankly, that's just not the case anymore. Not only has LEGO dominated with their massively successful franchise tie-ins, but LEGO has had an extensive catalog of games without licensing tie-ins dating as back as 1995. Nintendo has worked with TT Games to make LEGO City Undercover as an early launch exclusive for the Wii U. They've already made tons of games on Nintendo's previous consoles and handhelds, and Nintendo has already previously worked with LEGO to make Super Mario Legos. They made the LEGO NES, the question mark block. I mean, the LEGO Group and Nintendo have been working together for a very long time. It would be a perfect fit for Super Smash Bros. Now, some may argue that Legos are toys and shouldn't be included into Super Smash Bros. But guess what? Rob was also a physical toy as well, so clearly there isn't technically an issue with adding toys into Super Smash Bros. And if you disagree with me, then that means you're a fucking hypocrite. Saying that LEGO can't be included into Smash because of its origins as a toy company is also incredibly biased, because not only was Nintendo also a toy company before making video games, but they also even copied LEGO's success in the late 60s by making a competing LEGO product called N&B blocks, which were even referenced in one of the levels in Super Mario Land 2. I mean, considering the history between LEGO and Nintendo all throughout the years, the fact that there hasn't even been any LEGO representation in Super Smash Bros. Is freaking ridiculous. I mean, what the H is going on? LEGO deserves to have a fighter on the roster, and that's why the Brickster is clearly the best choice to add to Super Smash Bros. Alright gamers, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time on the HyperCharge. So then some dumb fuck makes this video, right? And then all these dumbass Smash fans start to think this is a good idea. The Brickster starts topping all the shitty ass character polls. It's trending on Twitter. Meanwhile, in this hypothetical scenario where this was real life and I talked about this in my previous video and said how stupid it would be, then all these dumbasses would show up and just be like, oh, why don't you like the Brickster? He's the most iconic video game character of all time. You said you liked Rob, but you don't like the Brickster, and that means you're a fucking hypocrite according to your argument, and that means that this is a logical fallacy, which means that this is a good idea. Why won't you let people have fun? You're being mean. Meanwhile, after every single DLC announcement, these motherfuckers would come out of the woodworks every single time and we're just like, how the fuck was the Brickster not included into Smash? No one gives a fuck about Minecraft. That's just a fucking ripoff of Legos. Legos is the most iconic franchise of all time. What the fuck is Sakurai doing? And it's like, you're just sitting there like, how could they? And it's like, how are you this fucking stupid? How do you not get it? So yeah, whenever this happens with all these other dumbass shit characters, it's fucking hilarious and I'll always make fun of it. I don't care. At the end of the day, being overly positive for the sake of being positive is just a fucking waste of time. It doesn't get the point across. It's just dumbass nerds jerking each other off and not being productive. And frankly, I think my approach is a lot more fun. So with all that said, let's have some fun and finally get around to the true matter at hand. Nintendo has finally released all of the DLC characters for Pack 1 and Pack 2, and everyone who loved my last video has been clamoring to get my thoughts on all the new DLC fighters. Now, what's really funny about that is that since I covered basically every single popular requested character in my previous video, almost all the DLC characters released in Pack 1 and 2 were already talked about in some capacity or another. And although I've changed my mind on a couple of things, I still basically feel the same way. Banjo and Kazooie was pretty cool and their moveset turned out exactly how I described in the video. Min Min was fucking boring as I expected because ARMS fucking sucks ass and like no one gives a fuck. The only people excited about Pyra and Mithra were degenerate sex perverts. The Minecraft characters looked as jarring as I imagined them being. They didn't include the Disney characters for Kingdom Hearts like I assumed, so they overemphasized on all the dumb anime shit that no one gives a fuck about. And having a Tekken character was pretty cool, but it also wasn't really necessary, but it's still a Tekken character, so it was still pretty good regardless. Still, despite some of my negative thoughts, I do think that all the DLC was pretty good overall. The good characters definitely outweighed the bad ones, and even some of the most uninspiring choices like Byleth are at least functionally fun to play. So with all that said, let's continue our roster discussion for what makes a good Super Smash Bros. Fighter by covering all the Pack 1 and Pack 2 DLC characters, talk about why certain DLC fighters are good or bad, and occasionally we'll branch off into other topics as we go along. Let's do it. Piranha Plant was a DLC character, which a lot of people forgot was DLC because they got it for free at launch. And although it wasn't part of the Pack 1 and Pack 2 characters, I do think it's a DLC character worth talking about. It was definitely one of the weirdest choices for a Smash character, but as far as creating a fighter for a basic Super Mario enemy, it worked out pretty well. Now, this did lead to the hilarious moment where Waluigi fans came to the realization that a fucking boring Mario enemy got into the game before Waluigi, but if you're actually a fan of the Super Mario series, it does make sense. It's pretty clear that next to Goombas and Koopas, Piranha Plants are by far the most utilized enemies throughout the series and have appeared in many different variations. They were in the original Super Mario Bros., they're in Super Mario Galaxy, they're in Super Mario 64, they're literally in almost every single Super Mario game ever made. They're also in all the Mario Kart games, they're in all the Yoshi games, they're in Super Mario RPG, all the Paper Mario games, they're in all the Mario Party games, all the sports spin-offs, they're in fucking Animal Crossing and The Legend of Zelda. Piranha Plant is such an iconic Super Mario enemy that its entire existence is tied to the green pipe, the most classic thing in the entire fucking series. At the end of the day, Piranha Plant has literally more clout and representation than Waluigi does in not only the mainline series where it actually fucking matters, but also in all the Mario spin-off games where Waluigi supposedly excels. Again, I can't emphasize enough how much Waluigi fucking sucks ass. Now, with all that said, Piranha Plant's moveset is actually pretty unique. All of their special moves are super cool with the poison gas and the spike ball and the long stem strike. The final smash is a really cool reference to the subspace emissary, and it's also pretty hilarious seeing how they designed the character based off the potted plant version from Super Mario 3D World. Now, while it's a really good addition to the roster overall, I still do think that it's kind of lame that this is the 9th Super Mario character included on the roster when there's a lot of other Nintendo series that still only have 1 or 2 characters. Of course, the increase in third-party representation has sort of helped to alleviate this problem, but as far as Nintendo representation goes, it's starting to feel like the Super Mario series is oversaturating the Nintendo side of things. It's obviously a lot less exciting for Nintendo characters to be added to the roster, but I do think that there's still a handful of good potential fighters they could add later down the road to help fill in all the gaps. You could add Pokey, you could add Tom Nook, you could add Dixie Kong, or even a playable Metroid fighter, or Waddle Dee, or fucking Tingle, or God forbid a second F-Zero character. And clearly a lot of these aren't exciting choices, but I'd argue that they're just as cool as Piranha Plant, and they also have the benefit of balancing out the roster better. So with all that said, Piranha Plant is definitely a weird, out of left field choice, but they're also a very unique fighter. It's a bit boring though, so I feel like this is like a 7 out of 10 character, not too crazy, but I would say it was worth the inclusion overall. Joker was the first DLC character they announced right before the release of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate at the Game Awards, and I would say my reaction to the announcement was a perfect mix of being surprised and also not being surprised. Like, there's this initial shock where no one was really expecting a Persona character being in Super Smash Bros., so the announcement was very exciting. But then when you actually think about how popular and critically acclaimed the series has been up to this point, it makes a lot of sense. Honestly, the only reason I was even considering buying a PS4 to begin with was to play Persona 5 and Bloodborne, so the Joker's inclusion to the roster instantly clicked with me. Now, in my previous video, I didn't talk extensively about Joker because not only did they already announce the character for the DLC literally seconds before the game was released, but also because no one was really whining about it as much, and I also didn't think it was a bad choice. Like, obviously you could argue that there's better characters you might think are more important, but if someone liked Persona a lot and wanted Joker as a fighter, then I didn't think that was an unrealistic demand considering how long the series has been around and how successful it is and how it's literally one of the only reasons to buy a PlayStation. On the other hand, Persona 5 was only a couple of years old when Joker was included as a fighter, so I also understand that most people would prefer to have a more classic character instead. For example, I saw a lot of people also wanted 2B to be included on the roster as well, and despite me personally loving Nier Automata a lot, she definitely wasn't a character I wanted in Smash, mostly because the game was only out for like a year or so when Ultimate was released. When I think of fantastic third-party fighters, I always think of characters like Mega Man or Cloud or Solid Snake that are already well-beloved, massively recognizable characters that have already established their place in the history books. I mean, even as stupid as some of these old-ass, washed-up characters characters can seem at times, at least you can understand people's irrational attachment to them since they played the games as kids. Meanwhile, all these newly created characters from like 2016 and onward, like Joker and 2B and Hollow Knight, just don't have the same kind of nostalgic appeal. Still, with all that said, I think Joker was a really good addition to the roster. All of Joker's special moves are really fun to use. You can do a lot of wacky shit with the grapple hook and the gun. Gaining meter by using Rebel's Guard is a fun way to counter attacks, and getting Arsene to pop out and briefly whooping some ass before the meter drains and going back on the defensive is a fun gameplay loop. In retrospect, it's kind of annoying how almost all the DLC characters have some alternate meter that gives them additional moves or passive buffs, but I feel like Joker's persona mechanic was by far the most justified one. The way Arsene powers up and changes Joker's special moves would obviously be too busted if his persona was constantly active after a certain percentage, and frankly, it's more fun to get access to Arsene at a lower percentage with his down B as opposed to just getting your ass kicked and getting your persona as a consolation prize. It's also an awesome way to utilize a persona in his moveset without restricting it to specific attacks or a final smash or something. It's by far one of the most solid DLC characters they've released gameplay-wise, and I think it's one of the best third-party characters they could have picked that's exclusive to PlayStation. In fact, when you're looking at all the classic PlayStation characters on the roster already, I feel like having Joker really round things out quite nicely. In retrospect, it's pretty crazy how far Super Smash Bros. Has come with including all these incredible PlayStation characters when Sony couldn't even pull it off themselves with PlayStation All-Stars. I mean, the PlayStation All-Stars roster is just ugh. I mean, they got Heihachi, Kratos, but no Cloud, no Snake. Apparently Crash Bandicoot and Spyro were so shitty they couldn't even get into this shitty game. They got Reboot Dante from DMC. They got fucking Cole McGrath, the absolutely iconic video game character Cole McGrath. I mean, this whole roster is like some wackadoo bullshit. Now, if I had to pick another classic PlayStation character for the roster, I feel like the next best character would probably be Dante, but not the shitty Dante from DMC, like actual Dante. You could incorporate his style switching with his taunts by utilizing the D-pad buttons and add weapon switching to his standard B, and you can have all of his special moves change depending on the current style and weapon you have equipped. You could literally replicate a majority of his moveset by just doing this alone. It just makes too much sense. It's too good of an idea. Now, to be fair, Kratos is probably more popular than Dante currently, but if I'm being honest, God of War is essentially just the more boring Western equivalent to Devil May Cry. So considering how incredibly biased the roster is towards Japanese created characters already, Dante would probably get in first, and as an elitist gatekeeping asshole, I just like him more. Again, there's also a lot of bullshit mascot characters from Sony you could choose from as well, but like I said in my previous video, I'm not going to pretend that I would be stoked for any of these characters to be included. Like, who gives a fuck about Sackboy? Anyways, with all that said, Persona is fucking awesome, and Joker is a fantastic inclusion to the roster. That's a 10 out of 10 fucking banger. He's the Joker, baby. Hero from Dragon Quest was the next character they announced for the Pack 1 DLC, and the reveal for this character was by far the one where I felt the least invested. I mean, as far as the series goes, I don't really care about Dragon Quest at all, and conceptually I initially felt like a Dragon Quest protagonist wouldn't have any distinguishing characteristics that would be super interesting. Again, this was another character that I didn't plan on talking about in my previous video because despite my personal opinions of the character, Dragon Quest is the most classic JRPG series ever made. And it doesn't really matter how unpopular you think it is when all you have to do is go on Wikipedia and pull up the fucking receipts. Okay, this shit has been around forever. If you ever played a video game that has cute slime blobs as enemies, it's because Dragon Quest literally invented that shit. Now, I did see some people write this off as another marketing campaign because Square Enix used this as an opportunity to promote the Switch port of Dragon Quest XI, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. I mean, clearly Dragon Quest has been around forever and all of his alternate costumes represent other heroes from the previous Dragon Quest games, so it definitely isn't as soulless of a choice as Corrin was. Despite my complete indifference towards the series, I was still a little concerned that Hero would end up just being another generic sword character with a down B counterattack, but this definitely wasn't the case. In fact, Hero is by far the most goofy-ass, batshit, insane character they've ever added to the series. The main gimmick of the character is that all of Hero's special abilities uses a certain amount of MP that you slowly recover over time or by attacking opponents, and each of his standard special moves have 3 different strengths depending on how long you charge and release them. He's got a fat fireball projectile, he's got a pretty dank lightning attack, he can summon a tornado to gain a shit ton of vertical movement to recover back to stage, and then his down B brings up a command menu which can be used to activate 4 of his 21 other special moves completely at random. You can shoot out a bunch of projectiles, you can just instantly kill the opponent or suicide yourself, you can create a massive fuck off explosion, you can put people to sleep, you can heal yourself, you can get passive buffs, you can get a temporary reflector like the Franklin badge, you can temporarily turn invincible by turning yourself into metal, you can just shoot up to the top of the screen and then bring yourself back to stage, you get flaming sword attacks, ice attacks, all sorts of shit. And Hocus Pocus will randomly activate any of these abilities or inflict a completely random status effect. Also, his smash attacks randomly do critical hits, you can just do a shit ton of damage completely at random and just one-shot motherfuckers off the stage. So with all that said, when Hero was announced and released, a lot of competitive Super Smash Bros. Players lost their fucking shit. From a competitive perspective, Hero could pull off the most insane, luck-based, random-ass abilities right out of his ass with basically little to no effort, and there's essentially nothing you can do about it besides just outright banning the character. Now, character balance issues in Super Smash Bros. Has never really been a problem for me personally, because a lot of these issues can simply be avoided by just playing the game as it was intended. I mean, I suppose Bayonetta is the most busted-ass fighter in Smash 4 when you use custom rules to play the most boring, stripped-down version of the game possible, but like, I don't know, it's not that big of a deal when you can just pick up a Pokeball and throw a bomb at this bitch. Also, on a side note, if you were mad at Bayonetta in Smash 4, like, that's just your fault for playing Smash 4, okay? Smash 4 is just the most boring-ass shit. The game is slow as hell, super defensive, they extended the kill box out to fucking infinity, characters would get up to like 280% and fly across the entire world for a minute straight and still manage to get back to stage, and matches would just drag out for so long. I don't know why people would play this game at all. So with all that said, Hero is fucking awesome, and yeah, he can do some incredibly goofy ass, busted shit, and he's probably a broken character, but I don't care, cause it's fun as fuck. He's easily the most fun character to play in Super Smash Bros. History, 10 out of 10, that's a fucking banger. Banjo-Kazooie was announced during the same Nintendo Direct as Hero, and for me personally, it was definitely the more exciting announcement of the two. In my previous video, I already talked about how I thought Banjo-Kazooie would be a really good fighter to include into Super Smash Bros., and frankly, it worked out exactly how I hoped it would. After all, designing this fighter was literally a no-brainer. They got the spring jump as the up B, they got the egg projectiles, they got the Wonder Wing, they run around by using the Talon Trot, they got the Beak Buster as their aerial down A, and all their standard attacks are based off their basic attacks. Of course, there's some people who thought this character was boring because it doesn't have alternate meters or absurdly complicated mechanics, but I do really appreciate the more classic approach that they took with Banjo and Kazooie. In fact, the only gimmicky aspect of the character is that the Wonder Wing can only be used if you have golden feathers, but it's really intuitive, it represents how it works in Banjo and Kazooie, and it also balances the move appropriately so players can't constantly spam it. Overall, Banjo and Kazooie's abilities and kit made them feel like they could have added this fighter back in Melee or Brawl, which is why I feel like they fit in really well with the rest of the cast. So with all that said, Banjo-Kazooie's inclusion is fucking awesome. It's a goddamn 10 out of 10 banger. Banger ass character. Now, if you watched my previous video and understood the points I made about Banjo-Kazooie's inclusion, then this should not have been that surprising of an announcement. But apparently it was for a lot of dumbasses who can't comprehend why Banjo-Kazooie was a better choice than all these other bullshit mascot characters. In my previous video, a lot of these dummies were upset because I mentioned that Banjo-Kazooie would be a good pick for the roster, while also briefly mentioning that all the other mascot characters were kind of irrelevant, which apparently came across as me being a biased hypocrite. As if I give a shit about being hyper-logical and morally consistent in a fucking Super Smash Bros. YouTube video. Like, shut the fuck up, you dickless nerd. Of course, if you actually watched my previous video, I was pretty transparent with the fact that Banjo-Kazooie was by far not my top priority pick. After all, the series basically died alongside the Nintendo 64, and Microsoft has done nothing noteworthy with the franchise to even consider it to be an important piece of culture on par with, let's say, Minecraft or fucking Halo. In fact, you could even argue that Crash Bandicoot is a more iconic and relevant video game character than Banjo and Kazooie, and you wouldn't be wrong. But what these dumbass Crash Bandicoot fans don't understand is that they're comparing the relevancy of a character in general instead of their relevancy to be included on the Super Smash Bros. Roster, which are two entirely different things. Like, clearly, there's a reason why Banjo-Kazooie stands out amongst these other bullshit mascot characters, and apparently there's a lot of dumb fucks who just can't seem to put two and two together. You see, unlike all these irrelevant bullshit mascot characters, Banjo-Kazooie was released exclusively on the Nintendo 64, and it was a very popular game that a lot of Nintendo fans played. And you know what else was on the Nintendo 64? Super Smash Bros, you fucking idiots! Back in the day, there was only like 10 good games on the entire fucking system, so obviously if you owned a Nintendo 64 and you even vaguely gave a shit about the original Super Smash Bros, then you probably also played Banjo-Kazooie. It's really not hard to figure this out. Like, clearly, I've been here since the beginning, playing all these games, so where the fuck have you been? Well, I know exactly where you were, because if you were one of these dumb fucks shilling for irrelevant-ass characters like Crash Bandicoot and Spyro, then obviously you didn't play any of these games because you had a fucking PlayStation. So why the fuck are you coming over to Super Smash Bros. Like after the fact and pretending like you know what the fuck you're talking about? It's like these dumbasses were just shitting themselves in the comment sections, and they're just like, what the fuck? You think Crash Bandicoot is bad, but you want Banjo-Kazooie? How could you say Banjo-Kazooie is better when you're shitting on Crash Bandicoot and Spyro? You're a hypocrite. There's like plus 1,000 thumbs up in all these stupid ass comments. And then right after I released my video, Banjo-Kazooie was announced for the Pack 1 DLC. Like literally the next announcement. And like, I'm sorry, all you dumbasses who made those comments are fucking idiots, and this shit is fucking funny. And you know what the best part is? I don't even like Banjo-Kazooie that much. I mean, I literally played the game like once or twice back in 2003. Like, for all I know, the game could be complete shit nowadays. In fact, by the time the DLC was released for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, I honestly didn't even give a shit. I loaded up the game for 5 seconds, hit a couple of buttons, and was just like, yep, that's Banjo-Kazooie. Back to Astral Chain. Meanwhile, other people were like impressed by this for some reason, and they were like, whoa dude, you fucking predicted it. You read the future. And it's like, no, I didn't do that. My previous video was not based on future predictions or what I thought was going to be in the DLC. The video was only about the quality of the fighters and how good or bad I thought their inclusions would be on the roster. Considering all of the elements out of all the future potential fighters, I thought Banjo-Kazooie had a good balance of moveset potential and relevancy to Nintendo, and I thought it would be a good addition to the roster during the time. That's all there is to it. That's the whole point of the video. So with all that said, Banjo-Kazooie was always a potentially good choice as a fighter, and the timing of the release for the Pack 1 DLC was just super convenient. It turned out exactly how I thought it would. It's a goddamn 10 out of 10. Classic shit. Terry was the next fighter announced for the Pack 1 DLC, and again, this was another character I didn't really care about either way. Obviously, since a lot of Super Smash Bros. Fans don't care about fighting games in general, I didn't talk about Terry in my previous video because no one was really whining about including him. Now, if I were to have talked about Terry during the time, I would have definitely mentioned the same things I did with Heihachi. Tekken, King of Fighters, and most arcade fighting games have definitely been around for a very long time. They all have huge lists of classic characters that would definitely work well as fighters in Super Smash Bros, and I don't think there's anything objectively bad about fighting game characters being on the roster. But despite feeling this way, I also don't really feel like any of the fighting game characters are really top priority picks, mainly because there isn't a single fighting game series that's really excelled on Nintendo consoles besides maybe Street Fighter. I also don't find fighting game characters to be the most exciting choices either. Now, I think the reason I feel this way is because I find that it's intrinsically more interesting to see characters outside of the fighting game genre being incorporated into a fighting game setting. After all, that's why it's so cool to see Link in Soul Calibur 2 and seeing all these wacky Capcom characters in Marvel vs. Capcom, and also why it's so funny seeing all these Nintendo characters fight each other in Super Smash Bros. Meanwhile, when fighting game characters cross over into other fighting games and in party games like Super Smash Bros., it sort of plays out exactly how you'd expect it to, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's just not as novel. Still, despite this, Terry's moveset does work incredibly well, and I think he's currently the most fun fighting game character to play. All of his special moves are really fun to use. He's got the Power Wave, Rising Tackle, Power Dunk, Burning Knuckle, and he's also the only character in the game that gives you an alternate back tilt side B attack, which lets you use Crack Shoot. Now, while having Crack Shoot is a really fun addition to his moveset, it's also kind of janky to use at times. Usually what ends up happening is that when you want to use Crack Shoot as a recovery or to attack your opponent, it'll sometimes activate in the opposite direction you wanted, and you'll just end up killing yourself. so clearly there's a reason why this alternate side B attack hasn't been done before with other characters. Now, the most fun about Terry is that by reaching 100%, you get access to Power Geyser and Buster Wolf by inputting their respective command inputs, which turns Terry into a fucking powerhouse. This does make Terry a very strong character, but again, I don't really care about character balance all that much, and I think these additions make Terry more fun to play, which I think is more important. So with all that said, Terry is a very solid DLC character, and he's a really fun addition to the roster. That's a goddamn 10 out of 10, classic ass shit, it's a banger, fucking banger alert. Still, as we all know, most Super Smash Bros. Fans don't give a shit about King of Fighters or fighting games in general, so it's no surprise that Terry's announcement was completely overshadowed by the inclusion of the Sans Mii costume. Now, to be completely transparent with you guys, I think Undertale is the most overrated game of all time. The entire experience is spent walking down barren empty hallways drawn in MS Paint where you're subjected to an endless cycle of dumb fuck pointless cutscenes, and if it wasn't for all the meme shitpost humor and the fantastic soundtrack manipulating the emotions of naive man-children, then this game would not have been nearly as successful. Now, regardless of my opinions of Undertale, the only reason I talked about Sans in the previous video was because Undertale fans wanted him as a playable character on the roster, which I thought was fucking stupid. So after Terry's announcement, all the Undertale fans went to my previous video and said that the video aged terribly because Sans was included in the game as a Mii costume, despite the fact that the entire video was about the roster, and the problems I had with the character's legacy and moveset potential for being on the roster. Like, if Undertale fans only wanted Sans as a Mii costume and Sans was topping the charts in all the Mii costume character polls, then clearly I wouldn't have given a shit. After all, the reason I was so critical of Sans was because if he was included on the roster in the same capacity as all the other DLC characters, it would have been a fucking stupid idea. I mean, Sans doesn't even do shit throughout the entire game. You only fight Sans one time on the genocide route that most players didn't even play, and even then you're basically just fighting a JPEG and dodging lasers. Basing a DLC fighter off this one and only boss fight encounter would be fucking foolish and would just suck ass. Assuming that you actually liked Undertale as a game, I feel like you would come to the conclusion that Frisk has a lot more to work with in terms of items and combat mechanics and would be a much better roster pick, since they're the main character that you play as on the neutral and pacifist routes. Regardless, even in my previous video where I was shitting all over Undertale, I literally said it'd be fine if Sans was included as an assist trophy, which frankly is a much better form of representation than a Mii costume because the character actually exists in universe. Meanwhile, with all these Mii costume characters, you essentially have to create this layer of disbelief where you download the Mii costumes, recreate the characters as closely as possible, and then sort of squint your eyes and pretend they're actually there. Of course, as we all know, the Sans Mii costume was groundbreaking territory for Super Smash Bros. Because Sans' character design is so basic and shitty that the Mii costume actually looked good in comparison. So based off this incredibly low bar set for the series, Undertale fans immediately moved the goalposts and pretended that they didn't spend the past couple of years wanting Sans on the actual roster, and then with their delusional childlike minds, they all simultaneously gaslit themselves into thinking that this was like the best possible way to include the character, which clearly is not true. I mean, if Sans was included on the roster as a proper DLC character like most Undertale fans wanted, he wouldn't be restricted to the exact proportions of the Mii Gunner, he wouldn't have the stupid gun arm, he wouldn't have an emotionless face and look like a costume character at fucking Disneyland, he would actually have a unique moveset. You would get the whole package with an entire Undertale stage with a bunch of Undertale songs. Like, clearly that's what most Undertale fans expected when they requested him as a roster character. Meanwhile, it's pretty clear that Sans' inclusion as a Mii costume just proves everything I said in the previous video. I mean, if Undertale was actually as influential and important as the fans think it is and was on par with like Minecraft or some shit, then Sans would have easily been included on the roster and it would have been a no-brainer. But since Undertale is just an overrated indie game, it got the Mii costume treatment like everything else. Like, Jesus Christ, Toby Fox literally went to Japan to suck Sakurai's dick and he still only managed to get one extra song in the game. Now, that's not to say that the Mii costume is bad, because frankly, a lot of Undertale fans are happy with the inclusion and it does look decent for what it's worth. But clearly, once the next Smash game comes around and the speculation for new potential fighters continues once again, Undertale fans are not going to settle for the same Mii costume. At the end of the day, even if you like the Mii costume, no one wants their favorite character to stay as a Mii costume. So with all that said, the way a lot of these characters are represented as Mii costumes is obviously better than nothing, but I personally just get nothing out of it. Like, clearly, when Mii characters were added to the roster back in Smash 4, it was marketed as a way to include incredibly niche custom characters that would otherwise be impossible to add. That's why the base game for Smash 4 introduced generic costumes and custom moves that players could use to recreate iconic characters in-game, and finally have Peter Griffin, Goku, Jesus Christ, and Nostalgia Critic duke it out on Battlefield. Meanwhile, when the DLC Mii costumes were added to the series, Sakurai and Bandai Namco took the terrible approach of basing the Mii costumes off popular requested characters instead, which completely goes against the initial concept. Like, what's the point of having a Dunban costume when its only purpose is to recreate Dunban and nothing else? Like, it doesn't even play to the strengths of the Mii characters at all. If we're going to jump through all these hoops to include Dunban in this capacity, why even bother using the Mii characters as a foundation so you can pretend they're Dunban when you could otherwise just create an actual in-game model so they could exist in universe and then give them a more generic sword moveset instead? Like, why are the Miis even being used at this point? To make matters worse, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate has only exacerbated this issue because now they've carried over tons of previous Mii costumes from Smash 4, despite the fact that a lot of those older Mii costume characters are now on the roster. Like, why the fuck would anyone use the King K. Rool Mii costume specifically designed to recreate King K. Rool as a Mii fighter when you can just play the game as King K. Rool? Like, it's so fucking stupid. On top of that, if you're ever hanging out at a random friend's house and you're not on your save file, then there's almost no guarantee that they'll even have all the Mii costumes downloaded, let alone having them already set up for you to use. And even if your friend is super accommodating and puts in all the work to recreate all the fake Mii costume characters, all you're really doing is spending money on alternate skins for the fucking Mii characters. Like, who fucking gives a shit? Byleth was the last character announced for the Pack 1 DLC, and it was by far the most negatively received DLC fighter of all time. Now, I personally don't have many issues with Fire Emblem as a series or with Byleth's inclusion as a fighter, but I also don't blame people for getting upset over this. After all, Nintendo set the stage for the Pack 1 DLC to feature bold new fighters from entirely new series that were never previously included into Super Smash Bros. And up until this point, the assumption was that we wouldn't get more Nintendo characters, especially ones from fucking Fire Emblem, the most overrepresented series on the entire roster. I saw a lot of people say that they could have announced Byleth as the first character to sort of soften the blow and make things more exciting for the final reveal, but at the end of the day, if Nintendo announced Byleth as the first DLC character, they wouldn't have sold nearly as many season passes for the Pack 1 DLC. That's why they launched the game by announcing a fucking Persona character, said all the other 4 DLC characters would be just as good as Joker, and then got everyone all riled up to buy the season pass day 1. Meanwhile, with Byleth being announced as the last DLC character, they've already suckered in all the dummies who pulled the trigger too early, while also using this opportunity to market Fire Emblem Three Houses and minimizing the impact of the sales of the Season Pass DLC, which honestly was the smarter thing to do from a business perspective. Like, do Super Smash Bros. Fans really think that these announcements are for their enjoyment? Like, apparently the entire marketing team at Nintendo is just doing this all for fun and don't want to ruin the excitement like they're throwing you a surprise birthday party or some shit. Like, don't be fucking stupid. Now, as far as Byleth's moveset is concerned, Sakurai has definitely taken some of the sword character complaints to heart and has clearly based the moveset off utilizing all the hero relics to address this criticism. Byleth still has a sword, but they also have a bow, a spear, and an axe incorporated into all of their attacks, and the way it works is that certain directions will correlate to using one of the 4 weapons. Overall, I think the concept was pulled off pretty well, and I don't have any problems with Byleth's moveset, but considering that this is now the 8th Fire Emblem character on the roster, I feel like Sakurai really need to do something a lot more bold to justify the inclusion. After all, in a 2D setting, a melee weapon is going to function the exact same way whether or not it's a sword or an axe or a spear. So simply changing out the sword for other melee weapons isn't that significant of a difference. Now, I don't really blame Sakurai for this because a lot of Super Smash Bros. Fans just seem to conflate sword characters as just any character that uses a sword. So it seems like Sakurai is trying to appease people who feel this way. Now, in my opinion, I don't think that's the actual problem. I feel like the real issue is that a lot of characters who use swords tend to all have similar abilities as one another and all have similar playstyles as a result, which is why a lot of people get so annoyed at all these fucking Fire Emblem characters. Now, in my opinion, the sword character character playstyle was established all the way back in Super Smash Bros. Melee with Marth and Roy. The moveset featured a neutral B you could charge up and release, a side B that releases a flurry of attacks that locks down the opponent, a super vertical up B, a ton of very basic tilt attacks with wide hitboxes, and of course the classic and infamous down B counterattack. These kinds of abilities were not only copied over to a lot of other Fire Emblem characters, but also to basically every future character on the roster which used a sword, with the down B counterattack being the most reused special move in the entire game. Of course, just because a character uses a sword doesn't necessarily mean that they follow this exact archetype. Link is probably the most obvious example of this due to being a Smash 64 character, and even other sword fighters like Shulk have special abilities like the Monado arts, which helps to differentiate their playstyle. This is also why a lot of people didn't hate Robin, despite being a Fire Emblem character, because all of their magic spells and the item durability mechanics deviate away from the standard Fire Emblem formula. Meanwhile, characters like Corrin and Byleth try to deviate away from this playstyle in their own ways, but I don't think there's anything they could do that would really sway people's negative opinions of them, because not only are they just slightly different, but they're also just more Fire Emblem characters that a lot of people didn't really want. So with all that said, I do think Byleth is a decent fighter overall, but they're easily the worst character included in Pack 1 by far. This is like a mid 6 out of 10 character, not all that exciting. In fact, one of the main reasons why I didn't talk about potential fighters in Fire Emblem Three Houses in my previous video was not only would it be the most boring inclusion possible, but also because I literally didn't even know who the characters were since the game wasn't even released yet. I mean, going back to these old character polls, Fire Emblem fans actually wanted Edelgard included on the roster before Three Houses was even released, which is hilarious because she ended up being one of the most hated characters in that game by far. Of course, when Fire Emblem fans don't know anything about the characters or the story and they're just looking at the box art, then obviously they'll prioritize hyping up the hot girl character because modern Fire Emblem fans are horny as fuck. Meanwhile, once the game was actually released, Edelgard turned out to be a giant asshole who tries to achieve her goals in probably the worst way possible, and she's essentially seen as one of the main antagonists on every single story route, with the exception of the fourth alternate game route where the game gaslights you into thinking she's doing the right thing. To put it simply, Edelgard is the worst character in Fire Emblem Three Houses, and the only reason anyone likes her is because they just want to fuck her, and that's it. So yeah, maybe next time when you want Fire Emblem characters in Smash, maybe you should actually wait until the game comes out and don't request dumbass characters you don't even know. I swear to God, the next time Smash comes around and these guys start hyping up the next Fire Emblem character from the game they haven't played yet, I'm just gonna lose it. Fire Emblem aside, I think the Pack 1 DLC was very good. Joker, Hero, Banjo-Kazooie, and Terry were absolutely fantastic choices and turned out to be awesome fighters on the roster, and while Byleth was a bit of a weak choice and ultimately disappointing as the final character, things could have been a lot worse. Still, it was hard for anyone to remain disappointed by Byleth because Sakurai was quick to announce that they were planning on releasing an additional 6 fighters for a second pack of DLC. Now, this second pack of DLC is where I think things went off the fucking rails, in both a good way and a bad way. You see, what's interesting about the Pack 1 DLC was that it was clearly planned at launch alongside the base game, whereas I feel like Pack 2 was given the green light later down the road after the game was released. Now, the reason I believe this was the case was because all of the assist trophies, Mii costumes, and spirits that were included into the base game were clearly added with the assumption that they would not be included into the Pack 1 DLC, since they went into development knowing they would release 5 more DLC characters later down the road. That's why it was so obvious that a lot of these highly requested characters would not be included as DLC in Pack 1 because they were already in the base game in some capacity. Meanwhile, the Pack 2 DLC is where all this shit went out the window. At the time of its release, it was pretty clear that Sakurai and Bandai Namco realized that they had one final opportunity to add in a bunch of highly requested characters. But now the problem is that a lot of the characters fans wanted on the roster were already being represented in-game through other means, which is why I think a lot of alternate characters from their respective series were added in instead. I mean, if Sakurai knew he had time to add in characters from ARMS and Xenoblade from the very start, then clearly they wouldn't have included the assist trophies and the Mii costumes in the manner that they did. Of course, most fans probably don't even give a shit and would probably prefer to just ignore the assist trophies and Mii costumes entirely so they could just get the characters they want on the roster, but from the developer's perspective, Sakurai and Bandai Namco probably hold these forms of representation representation to a much higher regard and believe that they're all worthwhile inclusions, which is why they're even in the game to begin with. So with all that said, the quality for the Pack 2 DLC wasn't nearly as consistent as Pack 1, and although there's definitely some fantastic characters added in Pack 2, the poor planning of the DLC caused a couple of botched characters as a result. So, let's talk about Pack 2. Min Min was the first character announced for the Pack 2 DLC, and the rollout and announcement for this character was fucking bizarre. In an unprecedented announcement during a Nintendo Direct, Nintendo was just like, okay guys, the next DLC character for Smash is going to be an ARMS character, but we're not going to tell you which one it's going to be. We're going to have an ARMS character Smash DLC announcement at a later date, so just don't get excited like you did with Byleth because we told you it's going to suck already, so now you can't get mad. So right out the gate, I'm thinking this is kinda weird. I mean, at first, I thought maybe they were planning on releasing ARMS 2 later down the road and wanted to add in a new ARMS character they couldn't talk about yet. Since they already included Springman as an assist trophy and Ribbon Girl as a Mii costume and all the other ARMS characters are just kinda whatever, then I didn't really see why they were doing this unless they were planning on announcing something a lot more exciting. But then lo and behold, they were just like, okay, yeah, we added Min Min, I don't know, whatever. Now, in my previous video, I talked about the possibility of Springman being included as a fighter, and frankly, I just didn't understand why anyone was losing their minds over a fucking ARMS character. Now, to be fair, I suppose ARMS was the latest new Nintendo series during the time, and it's hard to be upset about a Nintendo character being added to Smash. But at the same time, I feel like an ARMS character was probably the most safe and boring thing they could have done. After all, they have so much more time and opportunity to do way more ambitious things for the DLC that making fighters for more unique third-party characters seems like the better approach. So when they spend all this time and effort just to include more Nintendo characters that could have just been in the base game, it's just super lame. Now, I don't really have a problem with Min Min as a fighter over Springman, since all the ARMS characters are all functionally the same character, but I do think that Springman would have been the better choice if they didn't botch his inclusion. In Super Smash Bros., the fighters, assist trophies, and Mii costumes essentially form a sort of three-tier system of representation, and during the development of the base game, it's pretty clear that they thought Springman was the best character to represent ARMS. However, since they weren't including him on the roster, they instead opted for his inclusion as an assist trophy. Meanwhile, Ribbon Girl was also clearly the next best character to add in, as she's sort of the Ken equivalent to Springman in the game, so that's why they gave her a Mii costume. So now that both of these characters were already put into the base game, Min Min is now in this sort of weird situation where she's the third character they've considered adding, but now she's somehow getting the fighter slot over Springman because they just fucked up during the base game. I mean, if Min Min was just as good, then clearly everyone would have wanted Min Min on the roster to begin with, and she would have been the first character in the game to be represented as an assist trophy instead of Springman. Again, that's why it just feels like the Pack 2 DLC wasn't planned out. Now, regardless of how botched this inclusion was, Min Min's abilities and overall playstyle are so similar to Springman to begin with that it basically doesn't even matter. The only difference between the two characters is that Springman can use a parry by dashing and gets a charge buff below 25% health, and Min Min can kick things by dashing and gets a charge buff on her left arm by executing a throw. So as far as Min Min's moveset is concerned, she basically plays exactly the same as Springman would. She can punch things with her left arm by using the A button, she can punch things with her right arm by using the B button, she can change between the Ramran, Megawatt, and Dragon arms with her down B, and she also has a super jump and a tether grab recovery with her up B. She's also the first character in Super Smash Bros. To have smash attacks in the air, which on paper sounds really cool, but that's only until you realize that almost all of Min Min's smash attacks are just slightly longer punches. At the end of the day, Min Min is a really interesting character that clearly has a lot of thought put into it, but once you actually play as her in-game, her entire moveset feels incredibly underwhelming because all of her attacks attacks all feel the same, which frankly is a perfect representation of ARMS. I mean, Jesus Christ, almost all of her attacks are her just using the same 2 punching attacks. That's all she can fucking do. Of course, I can't really blame Sakurai for this because when he's so adamant to sticking to the source material and it just so happens to be fucking shit, there's just nothing you can do about it. I mean, I suppose he could have created elaborate new attacks to build up an ARMS character that would actually be exciting, but it's kind of hard to do that when ARMS is the most bare bones, sluggish fighting game of all time. Like, Jesus Christ, Super Smash Bros. Is literally designed for baby dipshits, and even this game is more complicated than ARMS. I mean, even the most casual player can pick up the game and accidentally pull off some crazy shit with it. Meanwhile, ARMS isn't nearly as enjoyable because it's so fucking basic. All you have is 2 punches and a grab. In fact, the game is so boring that the vast majority of ARMS fans are just Nintendo fans who infantilize the series by saying that it's good solely because it's creative. Like a fucking toddler's crayon drawing you put on the fridge. Alright, if you take any one of these fake ARMS fans and sit them down and ask them why they like the game, they will never tell you the game is fun. They'll say they like the character designs, they'll say they like the music, they'll say they like the in-game universe and lore of ARMS, but they'll never talk about the gameplay because they don't play it. So with all that said, Min Min is a very unique fighter in probably the worst way possible, and although there's so many other characters that would have been better, it's still a decent pick for a Nintendo character overall. Of course, you can again argue that Min Min's range on her punches makes her the most busted character of all time, but like I said, I don't really give a shit about the character balance, I don't care about the competitive scene at all, I'm not a pedophile. Like, yeah, I guess she's got big punches that can snipe you off stage, but guess what? I got a Master Ball, okay? Dodge Arceus, bitch. That's right, he can't do it. Anyways, Min Min is definitely like a solid 6 out of 10 character. It's not all that exciting, but I would say it was worth the effort despite how it turned out. You'll win some, you'll lose some. Steve from Minecraft was one of the biggest character announcements for the Pack 2 DLC, and everyone popped off so hard that it literally broke Twitter. Now, in my previous video, my initial thoughts on Minecraft was that if this fighter was included on the roster, the graphics would probably look really jarring, the character attack animations would probably look like shit, and I was concerned that all the mining and crafting aspects of Minecraft couldn't be fully realized in Super Smash Bros. So when I tuned in to the next Nintendo Direct and saw the dark cobblestone cave and Steve popped out, I fucking died. I died. Mario died. Everyone died. This shit looked so fucking weird. The gameplay footage and screenshots looked like they were fucking photoshopped. I didn't even know what I was looking at. Like, this shit still looks fake. Now, once all the dust settled and I got used to it and saw how Steve's gameplay mechanics worked, I think he is easily one of the best DLC characters they've ever made. Sakurai and Bandai Namco completely proved me wrong. They literally just put Minecraft into Super Smash Bros. With all the same mechanics. It's fucking awesome. You can mine for materials by holding B, you have a meter displayed on screen that shows all the materials you gathered, you can occasionally find iron, gold, and diamonds which you can use at the crafting table to craft tools, which are all used for all your standard tilt attacks, you can place blocks in midair and just fucking create an entire platform off stage, you can create little troll TNT traps with redstone and pressure plates, you can run into people with a minecart and stick other fighters into it as they fly off stage, and all of these abilities use your materials or are affected by the tools you crafted at the crafting table. To put it simply, Steve is the most perfect modern Super Smash Bros. Fighter ever made. Honestly, I thought the people who wanted this character were fucking dumb because I didn't think it'd be possible to incorporate all these gameplay mechanics, but Sakurai and Bandai Namco literally just pulled it off, and it's fucking incredible. It's literally the hypest shit. Of course, if you're a fucking old ass boomer and you never played Minecraft, you may think this is kind of a lame choice. After all, with Minecraft's massive popularity amongst younger audiences in the early 2010s and how open-ended the building mechanics were, the game itself became the foundation for some of the most cringe-ass shit ever created on the internet. So if you only ever engaged with Minecraft on this very superficial level, then obviously you'll probably think Steve's inclusion into Super Smash Bros. Is kinda stupid. Now, as an elitist gatekeeping asshole, I completely disagree. Minecraft has been around for more than a decade, it's commercially and critically acclaimed, it's literally the most popular game ever made in the history of the universe, it's loved by kids and adults of all ages, it's literally been ported to every platform imaginable, and it's set its place in the fucking history books. Of course, I'm sure there's still a bunch of old ass boomers that still disagree with me and think that I'm full of shit, so to further prove my case and help you delve into the mind of an elitist gatekeeping asshole like myself, let's do a fun little thought experiment and compare Minecraft to another massively popular franchise, Fortnite. Now, if we were to compare both of these franchises, it's pretty clear that Steve deserved the spot on the roster way more than a Fortnite character, and there's a lot of reasons for this. To put it simply, Minecraft is an innovative, beloved indie game that's popular because of how good it is, while Fortnite is popular because it discovers what's good and then rips it off. In its inception, Fortnite was initially inspired by Minecraft and utilized the same material gathering and crafting mechanics to build up bases in a PvE environment where you defend objectives against hordes of enemies. But then out of nowhere, the Battle Royale genre started kicking off in popularity around the same time in 2017 with PUBG. So then Epic Games was like, oh sick, this new Battle Royale thing is really popular, let's rip this shit off and jump on the bandwagon. So then they just shamelessly recreated a basic Battle Royale mode into Fortnite and mindlessly reused all the base building mechanics from the PvE mode because they just slapped this shit together during a lunch break and didn't put much thought into it. Meanwhile, since PUBG and all the other games in this new genre were essentially early access unoptimized piles of shit, Fortnite was basically the only Battle Royale game you could play that was actually optimized and didn't look like complete garbage and also wasn't overrun by Chinese hackers because it was the only Battle Royale game created by a massive corporation. So now since Fortnite essentially gained a pseudo-monopoly on this popular new genre, it quickly started gaining traction amongst Battle Royale players, and then all the dumbass kids jumped on the Fortnite train too, and then bing bang boom, Fortnite popped off to what it is today. Obviously, video games are all derivative of each other in one way or another, and nothing is truly original, but Fortnite is simply a cultural parasite. Even to this day, Fortnite continues to rip off their competitors and introduce new gameplay mechanics based off whatever's vaguely popular during the time. It continues to shamelessly collaborate with everyone and everything so they can gain even a pinch of clout, and even its entire business model is based off stealing shitty internet memes and ripping off popular dances from black people and selling them all as microtransactions. Alright, if someone recorded a homeless black man having a seizure and dying in a dark alleyway and it became a popular meme on TikTok, Epic Games would motion capture that video frame by frame and sell it as an emote for 500 V-Bucks. This is the most tasteless and shameless fucking video game I've ever seen in my life. Meanwhile, when Fortnite accidentally crosses over with something that's cool, it doesn't even matter because Fortnite turns other cool properties into Fortnite by being fucking lame. With like Sasuke Uchiha doing the default Fortnite dance. Like, what the fuck is this shit? Now, that's not to say that there isn't a lot of cringe-ass Minecraft videos and song parodies, because there's a lot of it. But the difference is that Minecraft as a video game is completely isolated from all this trash. At the end of the day, anyone can load up Minecraft for the very first time and have a genuine, wholesome gaming experience. And all this garbage created by parasitic content creators leeching off Minecraft's success has no impact on the quality of Minecraft as a video game. In contrast, you can't separate Fortnite from all this other dumbass shit on the internet because in Fortnite, the cringe is canon. Fortnite is like a kazoo in an asshole shitting into a bag of Skittles while it's dangling its keys and making wacky faces in order to appeal to the lowest common denominator to make a shit ton of money as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, Minecraft had humble beginnings. It was an indie game that had its own identity, the survival mode and the simple block building mechanics were awesome, it popularized the resource-based crafting mechanics that became so popular that every developer put it into basically every single game they made, from Terraria to The Last of Us to Breath of the Wild to even Fortnite itself, and the only reason Minecraft has the massive corporate backing it currently does is purely due to how good it was as an indie game. Of course, if you're just looking at the sales numbers and concurrent players and robbing both games of their context, then yeah, Fortnite might seem just as good as Minecraft. However, if you're taking a more critical approach by comparing their respective qualities and their overall positive impact on the video game industry as a whole, then Fortnite is just objectively worse. And yeah, this is a complete elitist gatekeepery asshole take, but that's just how I feel, and I'm right. In conclusion, that's why I feel like Steve's inclusion on the Super Smash Bros. Roster is a fucking 11 out of 10 perfect character, and also why I feel like adding a Fortnite character in Super Smash Bros. Would be fucking cultural suicide and would probably suck ass. Sephiroth was a character I was not expecting to be included into the Pack 2 DLC, but once it was revealed, it was instantly a choice I vibed with. He's an incredibly iconic character that fits in perfectly with the rest of the cast, and I think he really puts an end to the roster's lack of villain characters because Sephiroth is the most evil motherfucker of all time. In fact, his moveset perfectly represents just how scum fuck evil he is. He's got his super long fuck off sword with the most ridiculous range of any sword character to date. The Giga Flare is the most giant fuck off explosion projectile ever created. The Shadow Flare is just super scummy. He's got a down B counterattack that effectively just automatically activates regardless of what you do. And overall, Sephiroth feels like the arcade mode final boss character of Super Smash Bros. Even if he isn't an incredibly high tier character in the competitive scene, he just feels like he's overpowered. And that's everything I would have wanted from a character like Sephiroth. Of course, Sephiroth does sort of fall under the typical sword character playstyle that I mentioned before, but I do think he has enough unique abilities that really differentiates him from the rest of the cast. Also, he's fucking Sephiroth. Like, at the end of the day, if you have one of the most iconic villains of all time and you can include them into Smash, like, who gives a shit if they have a sword or not? Like, he's worth putting into the game just to have him there. Still, despite all this, I do think they went a little overboard by giving him his winged form. I mean, it's pretty cool that he has this additional mechanic that allows him to triple jump and gain super armor on his attacks, but in my opinion, the wing form just feels like something they added in just for the sake of making a more complicated DLC character. Also, on a more personal note, I just think the black wing looks incredibly goofy. I mean, I understand that he's the one-winged angel, so that's why he has the black wing, but for the most part, this is just some dumb Nomura shit. Like, Sephiroth didn't have this shit in Final Fantasy VII. It's just some retcon bullshit that only appears later down the road in Kingdom Hearts and Advent Children, all this FF7 compilation bullshit that I honestly just hate. Regardless, I do think Sephiroth is an awesome character for the roster. He's one of the most iconic video game characters of all time. This is a goddamn 10 out of 10 banger. This is not up for debate. It's fucking Sephiroth. That's it. Pyra and Mythra were definitely one of the weakest choices for the Pack 2 DLC, and I think they are easily the worst fighter out of all the DLC characters. In my previous video, I talked a lot of shit on these characters because frankly, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 sucks ass. But now that this fighter is in the game, I actually have a lot more issues with it. First of all, I think it's pretty clear that the whole initial appeal of having a Xenoblade Chronicles 2 fighter was having blades and drivers fighting alongside each other. So when people were requesting Rex and Pyra as a single fighter, I could at least understand why that would be cool from a gameplay perspective. You could have had Rex running around with Pyra as a sort of puppet character and doing all sorts of wacky Rosalina ice climber shit, and honestly, I feel like this would have been the peak potential for having a Xenoblade Chronicles 2 character, despite how lame of a character Rex is. Now, just like with ARMS, Sakurai and Bandai Namco didn't plan on having a Xenoblade Chronicles 2 character for the base game, so they simply opted to include Rex as a Mii costume. So just like with Min Min, we have now run into the same problem again. They finally have the opportunity to include Rex and Pyra as a fighter, but now since Rex's inclusion was botched with the Mii costume with the assumption that they didn't have time to do it, they now have to take this much more boring approach of just adding Pyra and Mythra as a single fighter instead, which in my opinion is way less interesting. Of course, being DLC characters, Bandai Namco definitely put in the extra work to try to make them as flashy as possible, but in my opinion, Pyra and Mythra are literally just glorified Fire Emblem characters. They both have the neutral special you charge up and release. You have a side B attack that unleashes a flurry of attacks you can use to lock down your opponent. They both have a super vertical up B. They both have typical tilt attacks that generic sword characters have. And finally, instead of having the infamous down B counterattack and truly making these characters on original, you instead have the ability to swap between the two characters mid-battle, which comes across as a lazy attempt to make things appear more interesting than they actually are. Not only are Pyra and Mythra's movesets incredibly similar to the typical sword character playstyle already, but the only significant differences between both characters is that Mythra is fast and hits light, while Pyra is slow and hits hard, which is about as minor of a difference as they could have possibly done. In fact, this is arguably the worst implementation of the swapping mechanic to date. Pokemon Trainer's entire kit was built around swapping between 3 different fighters already, and each Pokemon had vastly different special moves and unique abilities, and this was added back in Brawl. Zelda and Sheik were later separated as different fighters in Smash 4, but even back in the day when you could swap between the two, it was awesome that you could go from using magic projectiles with Zelda and then swap to Sheik and do cool ninja shit. And it was also a clever way of representing Zelda's abilities from Ocarina of Time because they're both the same character. Spoilers. Meanwhile, Pyra and Mythra have been included together with this same logic since they're canonically the same character, quote unquote, but unlike Zelda and Sheik, Pyra and Mythra are so similar to each other that it doesn't feel justified at all. It's like being able to swap between Marth and Roy. Like, why even bother? Now, I don't really have a problem with this if Sakurai truly believes this was their one and only opportunity to pull this off, but at the end of the day, they just fucking botched it. So with all that said, Pyra and Mythra are by far the most boring DLC fighter. This is like some 2 out of 10 bullshit. It's the least interesting character as far as representation and gameplay is concerned, and all this work was put in for what? A fucking Xenoblade Chronicles 2 character? Are you fucking kidding me? Like, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 fucking sucks! The story is the most basic ass, cookie cutter, boring ass shit. The pacing is so fucking slow, the characters are all bland and uninspired. It features the most generic anime art style of all time, and then to top it all off, they completely ruined the amazing combat system from the first game solely to justify forcing in big titty anime girls into the combat system who just stand around and point a laser at you. It's the most blatantly trashy fan service game I've ever played. The only people who like this game over the original Xenoblade are sex pervert losers who are forced to consume this trash to control their urges. I swear to God, the only reason Sakurai added these characters in was so competitive players would hopefully jerk off to them instead of raping kids. Anyways, with all that said, the original Xenoblade has a much better story with better characters and an awesome combat system, and this shit is just worse in every aspect. Fuck this game and fuck these dumbass characters. Kazuya was the next fighter for the Pack 2 DLC that I also didn't really feel invested in either way, but since Tekken is an awesome fighting game series, any potential character for the roster would have been great. In my previous video, I talked about the possibility of having a Tekken character as a fighter, and the only thing I really mentioned was the fact that the vast majority of Super Smash Bros. Players don't play other fighting games or even care about them at all. Like, Jesus Christ, do you guys remember when Smash players discovered Ryu's invincibility with his wake-up Shoryuken and were like, holy shit, this is some undiscovered tech. I'm calling this tech the Mamma Mia. Like, dude, come on. Meanwhile, when this DLC came out, these guys were calling Kazuya a Shoto. What the fuck? Anyways, regardless of this petty FGC bullshit, Kazuya turned out to be a really good character on the roster, and there's really not much else to talk about. His special moves are super fun to use, he's got an absolutely massive list of standard moves with multiple command inputs and diagonal inputs as well, and his move list is so lengthy and complicated that it perfectly represents Tekken as a series. If you're looking at this massive list of moves and being completely overwhelmed at being able to learn how to play this character, then that's, by design, welcome to Tekken. I suppose I could go into every single little detail for every single move, but frankly, all that matters is that all of his moves are super fun to use. His combos string together perfectly, the hits are very meaty and feel impactful, a lot of his command inputs are also super satisfying to pull off, his grabs even have the same unique cinematics from Tekken in 1v1 fights, and overall, Kazuya is a very solid character on the roster. That's a goddamn 10 out of 10, it's a banger, fucking banger alert. Now, as I mentioned before, I didn't think adding in more fighting game characters on the roster would be worth it, but now that Kazuya was added in alongside Terry, I think I've changed my mind a bit. Having all these fighting game characters together all in one game is a lot better than I initially thought, because now that Terry and Kazuya were both added in as DLC characters, their overall impact on the game was a lot greater than it would have been if we only got one of them. So with all that said, while I still don't feel like fighting game characters are a massive, huge priority for the roster, I'm definitely a lot more open to the idea. I still think they should add in Chun-Li later down the road. They could also add in Soul Calibur characters with like Siegfried and Nightmare. Maybe they could add in Soul Bad Guy from Guilty Gear, or maybe do something a lot more ballsy like Virtua Fighter or even Rival Schools. Hell, if we're adding in these big titty bimbos anyways, put in some DOA girls. Get honkers up in this bitch. Mortal Kombat is some fucking boomer shit. Fuck that. Don't add that. Like, oh man, he ripped out his spinal cord and fucked him in the ass with it. Like, who gives a fuck? Every character in this goddamn series looks like a fucking trick-or-treater with the shittiest ninja costumes they could find at the bargain bin at Spirit Halloween. I just don't care. Make it a me costume, it'd look just as good. Anyways, I could keep talking about this forever, but we just gotta move on. Sora was the final DLC character for the Pack 2 DLC, and despite how lame Kingdom Hearts is as a series, I do think he was a decent pick for the final character. Since Sora was the most highly requested character that was also notoriously difficult to include, there really wasn't a better character at this point that would pop off as hard and also end the game on a high note for the vast majority of people. Obviously, there's way more Capcom characters I would have preferred that I think would have been better, but I also recognize that the Super Smash Bros. Audience is filled with a lot of adult man-children who like baby games and cartoons. So Kingdom Hearts is very popular in this environment, and this is just the sad reality we all live in. Anyways, during the reveal of this fighter, I was pretty scared that they would include Disney characters in his stage or incorporate Donald Duck and Goofy in some capacity in his final Smash. But luckily, this was not the case, and someone made the right decision to remove all the Disney content. In my previous video, I speculated that they would most likely just double down on all the dumb anime shit because they would have nothing else to work off of, and that's basically what happened for the most part. Like, yeah, technically Disney has copyright information stamped onto the game now, and Sora has an incredibly small Mickey Mouse logo on his Keyblade that you'll never see in game, but this isn't as significant as like Mickey Mouse running around and existing in universe. Now with all that said, Sora is basically just another standard sword character with a lot of the same basic moves built into his moveset, right down to the infamous down B counterattack. To be fair, they did some interesting stuff with his moveset where his neutral B cycles between 3 different magic spells, and some of his tilt attacks can combo for a bit, but for the most part, Sora's entire moveset is sort of like if Marth fucked Jigglypuff. He's incredibly lightweight, his jumps are almost too floaty, and his up B can even be cancelled into his side B, which gives him an insane amount of air mobility. All these aspects of Sora definitely make him feel pretty unique amongst the rest of the roster, so I would say it was worth the inclusion. But at the same time, his moveset is also very straightforward and isn't too exciting. Still, I do think having Sora on the roster is worth it for the representation alone. And despite how barren it feels at times with all the Disney stuff removed, I do understand why they decide to go with him despite all the apparent downsides. Now, despite how positive this all sounds, I still think Sora's inclusion is very problematic for the future of the series. First of all, it's pretty clear that this may very well be the last time we'll ever see all these characters together in one game, and Sora's inclusion as the final DLC character has definitely exemplified this issue. Third-party representation has driven a lot of hype for the past couple of games, and while it has become the most exciting aspect of the series, it's also a very short-sighted approach because of how difficult it is to maintain the roster for future sequels. As we've seen before, even characters like Solid Snake weren't brought back for Smash 4, and supposedly Cloud was almost not even included into the base game of Ultimate. Meanwhile, not only do they have to deal with all these other new DLC characters that have to be renegotiated for the next game, but now if they ever want to bring back Sora, they now have to go through this supposedly incredibly difficult process again every single time they want to make a sequel. Of course, if Sakurai truly believes that this is the last Smash game of its kind, then maybe Sora's inclusion was worth it just so it could happen. But at the end of the day, it's only going to be a detriment to the future games in the series when Sora inevitably doesn't make the cut. To top it all off, just because all the dumb Disney shit wasn't included with Sora this time, doesn't mean that it can't be reintroduced later down the road. Even in the perfect world where Sora is brought back for every sequel, there's always going to be a slight chance that they'll update his final Smash with Disney characters, or end up adding Mickey Mouse in the background of a new stage and ruining the fucking game. Now, Disney characters will probably never be included in future games due to the massive copyright shenanigans and how much of a pain in the ass it's going to be just to get Sora himself. itself. But who's to say 20 to 30 years from now, when Sakurai inevitably dies within our lifetime and the next person in charge has the time and resources to actually go through with all these terrible ideas? At the end of the day, Sora has now become the Achilles heel of Super Smash Bros. If any non-video game material is ever added into any future game in the series, it'll most likely be because of Sora's inclusion on the roster, and I don't think that's a good thing. Perhaps 30 years from now, when Donald Duck and Goofy are running around during Sora's final smash and Disney characters are running amok in the new Kingdom Hearts stage, then fuck it, just adding Goku at that point, it doesn't even matter. Now, some people may think I'm overreacting to this, and I do recognize how crazy I sound, but I just want to remind you that back in the day, it seemed almost impossible that Solid Snake was added to Super Smash Bros. Brawl, and now the roster looks like this. Even if everything I'm saying right now sounds ridiculous, it's still a possibility in the future. So with all that said, Sora is a pretty decent DLC fighter, and while I don't care about Kingdom Hearts at all, I do recognize that a lot of people wanted him on the roster, so it's kind of hard to be super selfish about it. This is like a 7 out of 10 character if I'm being more objective. It's still sort of boring as far as his moveset works, but as we all know, this could have been a complete disaster. Frankly, we just dodged a bullet having to deal with this dumbass series. So there you have it. That's all my thoughts on all the DLC characters for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. The game is incredible as it always was, the DLC has only made it better, and regardless of how good the series is, Super Smash Bros. Fans will continue complaining about dumbass characters not being in the game, and I will continue being an elitist gatekeeping asshole and keep making videos about it. Obviously, there's a lot more characters that I think would be cool to add to the roster in the next game, but it's also kind of hard to complain about the current state of the series when Super Smash Bros. Has delivered on so much. They have every single Nintendo character imaginable, tons of classic video game characters from all the other major consoles, tons of classic retro characters, tons of popular modern characters, it has tons of fighting game characters. The series continuously added the most highly requested characters over and over and over again. And Sakurai somehow managed to add in the most impossible kinds of characters multiple times. So despite certain characters not being on the roster, it's kind of hard to be upset over it when the series has continuously reached these impossible milestones. As a longtime fan of Super Smash Bros., I've gotten everything I wanted out of this series tenfold. Now, I suppose you could be upset that they didn't include characters like Master Chief in the DLC, but just sit down for a moment and think about what you're actually saying right now. You are upset that they didn't include Master Chief in Super Smash Bros. The fact that you can even feel this way and actually have this come across as a valid complaint is just a testament to how far the series has come. I remember back in the day, if you wanted Cloud in Brawl, you were a fucking psycho and everyone would meme on you and call you an idiot. But with Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, we have now come full circle 12 times around the world to where people are upset that the character who shotguns demons' heads off in an M-rated violent-ass first-person shooter was only included as a Mii costume. Like, if this happened in any other series and you were disappointed by this, you would come across as the most ridiculous motherfucker of all time. But because Super Smash Bros. Has opened the door to so many possibilities, this complete impossibility of a character only getting the Mii costume treatment is now a valid complaint because the boundaries of the series have been pushed to their absolute limits. Again, this all comes back to the true main point of my previous video. With the current state of Super Smash Bros. And how far the series has come, how can you still be disappointed when almost all this shit you're mad about was literally an impossibility for the longest time, you ungrateful motherfuckers? So with all that said, you guys better enjoy this series while it's still good. This is the craziest roster of any video game ever made, and it's not going to stay that way. If you're still disappointed by this masterpiece of a game, then you're just an idiot. And yes, technically it's well within your rights to dislike whatever you want, and you could hypothetically hate masterpiece shit, but it's also within my rights to call you a fucking idiot for it and make 2 entire feature-length movies dedicated to how stupid you are. So that's the end of the rant. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is fucking awesome. I'll see you next time.